WordPress and SEO. How do you optimize a WordPress-based website? The reality is that WordPress is the top most popular CMS or web platform. And one of the main questions that I see is like, is there something that I should know in particular to optimize my website to perform well in WordPress? So to talk about this and to clarify all of the doubts about SEO and WordPress, I have invited someone who has tons of experience with WordPress, Jono Alderson, technical SEO consultant who until not so long ago worked for Joe's, pretty much the most popular SEO plugin for WordPress and also now for Shopify too. So welcome, Jono. It's wonderful to be able to have you today with us.
Thanks for having me. This is such a treat. I've been looking forward to this.
To start a little bit of the conversation, right? Just to clarify regarding WordPress, I saw that actually one of the questions for today's session was about the difference between WordPress.org and WordPress.com. And I realized that, and I went and took a look, it's like the sites have such a bad communication of right? So pretty much the difference is that the CMS, you can download it and use it in whatever hosting service that you may have already or you may want to hire. And that, I believe, is available through the .org. But then WordPress also has a service to self-host pretty much their own CMS through the .com. So I think that's pretty much it, right, Jono? Is there something else that you would like to clarify between the differences there?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I think you hinted at that's a really bad experience and really frustrating and confuses a lot of people. So yeah, we're stuck in this weird position where WordPress is a piece of software that you can download and host for free and do what you want with. And WordPress is also a company where you can buy hosting for your WordPress plug. Yeah, it's really messy. So yeah, there's a free version and there's a paid version. But yeah, they come with pros and cons.
Just mention actually the biggest advantage, let's say, of WordPress, which is the reason why so many websites use it. It is free, right? You can install it for free on your website. And there are also many plugins and themes that we can use with it to personalize the website experience. They're also free or freemium, right? There are many out there that are paid. But yes, it's still possible today, I believe, that create and enable and develop very easily a website, or relatively easy a website without being a web developer yourself, that does what you want and break the bank before converting, before selling, before achieving the goals that you want with your website, right? And to start like getting into the topic, right? This is one of the things that I will say that a lot of people misunderstand, or how many people end up selling WordPress too, also for SEO, right? Or WordPress is SEO friendly. You don't need to worry about SEO with WordPress, or it's going to be a few clicks away, right? So one of the biggest misunderstandings and issues, and which end up causing a lot of errors in SEO processes, is believing that WordPress, or any web platform for that matter, will be by default pre-optimized and SEO ready. And I would say that is also one thing to be SEO ready or friendly, and another thing to be already optimized for the context. Anyway, so what I would say that is the first big mistake that I see people doing with WordPress and with many other platforms. But what would you say is the biggest error that you see when people start configuring WordPress hands-on, that also even SEO professionals, not even business owners, do with SEO, but SEO professionals end up doing with the platform?
Sure, it's a really great question. And I think the answer is that the biggest mistake they make configuring it is they don't configure it, because they have this perception that it's SEO friendly out the box, that it's pre-optimized, etc. So they don't take the time to think, okay, I'm optimizing a website for a bakery, but my bakery is different from all the other bakeries. I don't know, it's only does chocolate, or it's vegan, or it serves dogs, etc. And therefore, I really need to go through all of the settings and look at every single one and think about, does this apply? Okay, there are 3 options here. Which of these ones best fits my things? Have I checked my opening times? Have I described my address in my all of these things? People very rarely, even like top tier SEO professionals, I see forgetting or overlooking the importance of just going through all of these kinds of basic settings. Where how am I describing describing and representing my content? Am I managing which types of pages and content Google should be crawling or not crawling? That's super important. If I've got a website with, I don't know, a client area, I probably want to make sure that my SEO settings say, hey, Google, don't come and index these invoices in that client area. People don't put the time in to go through and think about, for this type of page, for this type of content, how should Google treat it? What should the title be? What are the settings? And really just managing that. And I think that's in part because a lot of these platforms, as you say, have marketed themselves as SEO friendly and it all comes done out the box. But really, I don't think we'll ever get to a point where any platform does that kind of level of business context, that added context that you have that you need to apply to those pages. So yeah, a lot of people overlook that. And all the tools are there, all of the options are there, but people kind of get a bit lazy with that, I think.
I think that
it's hard work.
Potentially another error that I can think people making, especially at the beginning, right, is I mean, taking some best practices to the extreme, right? Like I have seen like people saying, oh, I know that you should be careful with tags, right? And no indexing all of their tags. But then I realized when I go and take a look at the website is that they are actually relying a lot on tags for their main taxonomy, for all of the categories areas, not actual categories. And they have no index them all just because they read somewhere that they should be no index to avoid content duplication issues. But yes, that ends happening when you also have categories targeting the same topics. And
exactly. And for some sites that might be right, but for some sites it won't. And you've really got to think, okay, my cupcake site only has 3 categories, it has 1,000 tags. Maybe my logic should be different. Yes.
100%. So I see that, and I believe that here it is critical to take with a grain of salt all of the guidelines that you read out there and apply your SEO logic and the rules that you know are true to your own particular website, right? I believe that there shouldn't be a right or wrong here if you want to use both categories and tags, as long as it makes sense that they like complement well each other, right? While it doesn't make sense, indeed, it's like if, as John mentioned, if you have a bakery website, you have a cookie categories and a cookie tags. No, it's the same. Why you will have both, right? You have a cookie category and potentially you want to have tags
chocolate, strawberry, flavors,
like chocolate cookies or cookies for Halloween, etc., right? But what it is important is that you structure and organize and think how they will play together. Another thing that I see people doing, unfortunately, is installing all the plugins, right? Which I think that this connects well with one of the questions asking is like, is actually installing many plugins bad? But the problem is like, what are these plugins doing for you versus what is the burden that they are generating to your website?
Exactly.
How much slower is making your website be? How is making you to not being able to make other configurations that you might want because it adds up some restrictions? So is again assessing here the pros and cons as usual. So my question here will be, which are those plugins, let's say, that you will always install or to at least try out, or that you always like to test and assess, and you think that are very useful in most of the scenarios? And how much do you think is like too much?
Interesting.
What criteria to use as a threshold, right?
So I love this explanation. You're completely right. Like, not all plugins are the same. Some plugins will be 3 lines of code that make a tiny change, which has near enough 0 impact on performance, on overheads, etc. Some plugins will mean my page takes 10 seconds to load and turns it into a NASA rocket ship with bells and whistles, etc. Some security plugins might slow down my pages a little because they do a whole bunch of really important analysis and protection stuff in the background to make sure you're not trying to hack me. All of these things are trade-offs. And you can think about it in a similar kind of way that you might think about electricity usage in your home. Like, putting the lights on costs electricity and creates an overhead, but it's quite an important function. Do you need a kettle? The kettle uses a lot of electricity in a short burst, but it's quite a useful utility. These are all trade-offs and decisions on resources. And if you have 1,000 gizmos plugged into your electricity at home, yeah, at some point your fuse box is going to explode. It's exactly the same with your WordPress site. So some plugins absolutely fine, some have huge amounts of overhead. I would test a little bit. I would always try and do a little bit of due diligence on how big and complicated is this thing. I would try and focus on using plugins that do one thing very well rather than 20 things kind of averagely. These plugins are just code. They're just extra bits of code written by people. There's nothing magical. But one person writing a whole bunch of generic code that does 20 things probably isn't a specialist, probably hasn't done that level of due diligence. So try and be laser focused. Some that I always go to, obviously, a Yoast SEO. There are 2 or 3 other big SEO plugins, but they are orders of magnitude worse and less sophisticated. Feel free to ask me all sorts of interesting questions about that afterwards. There's a few architectural ones I really like. There's a plugin called ACF that lets you really extend and customize metadata on your posts. So say I've got a bakery website and I want to have structured data about my ingredients and my calories and my cook time because I want to be able to use schema or generate a PDF or put something in my sidebar. ACF is really nice for that. A few others. WordPress's internal search sucks really bad. There's a really nice plugin called Relevancy or Search WP. They're both really good. They give you a much more sophisticated internal search system. Really good for users. Means the people who are actively searching because they're trying to find something, they actually find it rather than just getting annoyed. And then essentially your selection of kind of forms plugin, caching plugin, image compression plugin, a security plugin. There are a couple of others, but yeah, there's kind of 4 or 5 core areas. And outside of that, whatever makes sense for your business, I wouldn't overload it. I wouldn't go, I need 3 different plugins to put sliders on my homepage and a plugin that adds snow to my shopping cart and all these bits. I would try and keep it as small as you can, but yeah.
Speaking about speed optimization, because I believe that this is one of those areas that, especially with WordPress, because of how we overrely many times on plugins that can help to a lot of to the performance of the websites, which are a couple of the top 2 favorite plugins for speed that are easy to set.
Two. WP Rocket is really good if you want something that's a bit plug and play. They're fairly, so not a free one, but they're pretty cheap. And you install it, you click a few fairly simple buttons, and it does a whole bunch of the heavy lifting. The next level up above that, I think, is Nitro Pack, which is a bit more pricey, operates in a different way, comes with some more sophisticated toggles and bells and whistles, but it lets you get a bit further and you can customize things a bit based on your side. And then outside of both of those, if you're not already running it, get Cloudflare. That will do a whole bunch of the heavy lifting for you. It has a free version. It takes 5 minutes to set up in front of your website. The $20 a month version will unlock a whole bunch more bells and whistles. Yeah, get one of those 2 plugins and Cloudflare, and most of your performance things are solved.
I totally agree with Cloudflare. I actually have Cloudflare with, I think it's learningseo.io, in fact,
Nice.
because it's so easy to integrate. It has a plugin too that allows you to enable it quite easily. And yes, like very straightforward CDN to use, very, very cheap. There's also like a $5 option if you want.
WPO, really nice.
Yeah, super.
For APO.
Yeah, give it a go for sure. That I am a user too. I'm super happy with it too. So that is what would you say besides the top plugins, right? Top configurations that you see people doing badly or misusing. So for example, I can think that still today I see people not configuring well permalinks or leaving dates unnecessarily in permalinks, even if they are not even a related website, right? What are those configurations that are native in WordPress or very, let's say, usual to get access to or to configure that you will highly recommend the people to get well?
So the permalinks one is really nice. Yeah. People, in the same way that people have weird opinions about no indexing tags, they do weird things with their permalinks. They're convinced that having the date in is really important. For example, none of that matters. I think the rules for permalinks are, if you've already got something reasonable, don't change it because you'll make a mess. But if you're in a position where you're starting out with a new site, just put something sensible and intuitive in. Like category stroke post name is quite nice. Like, where is this in the site? What is it? Like, that URL is always going to do a good job of describing what that page is. And there's no fuss, there's no weirdness. You're not trying to be smarter than Google. There's a weird trend at the moment that's been around for a few years where people try to artificially flatten their URLs. So like, we remove all the hierarchy, we remove all the categories. URLs only come out the site route because they think that those pages being closer to the site route is better for SEO. It's all nonsense. Just use sensible SEO, sensible URLs. And the other one that people really, every single site in the world gets wrong, we've already touched on it, is the tags versus categories thing. When you tag or categorize a post in WordPress, you create or add that post to an archive page for that tag. So if I've got a whole bunch of posts about cookies that are tagged as chocolate, I now have a page called chocolate that lists all of those cookies. If I have 1,000 tags, I have 1,000 more pages. And if I've got multiple posts in those archives, they're paginated, I create thousands and thousands of these kind of really low value pages. That's all right in theory, but people quite often tag a post with 10 different things. They'll treat it like Instagram. So they'll say cookie, cookies, bakery, baking, bakeries, when actually they need to do a bit of editorial thinking. I think the purpose of this tagging system is to help users to navigate easily between related content. And there's a kind of SEO benefit of that as well, maybe. It's not to tag every single conceivable word or phrase that might be associated with this post. And actually, the best thing that people can do with their tagging setups is reduce it down. Less is so much more, so much better. So if you've got tags with fewer than 3 posts in them, I would question the value of those tag pages and maybe delete them and consolidate them. Maybe you don't need orange and pineapple and banana. Maybe you can just have fruit and move all that in. And similarly with categories, if you've got 100 categories, you've got the most diverse content in the world, or you've fragmented it a bit. So bring all of that back in and make those pages really good. Make sure that they've got good, rich, descriptive content, that they act as landing pages. Like, there's a kind of weird myth in the SEO industry that tag pages should be no index. We mentioned it. And actually, they can be incredible landing pages. It's just a list of posts. And there are people who search for top X, guides to, lists of. Those kinds of plural researching searches can be really well served by tag and category pages, but you need to make those pages good. You need to invest the same resources on those that you do on your content pages and your blog posts, etc. So yeah, the taxonomy management is the biggest failure of people in this space, definitely.
100%. And even if, for example, whenever you are starting with a new subtopic, right? And you don't have yet as many articles or products or whatever type of content your website is offering, but you know that you will have it and is an important topic that you will target and want to rank with. What you can set with the help with a developer are rules, right? Like, if this category or tag is featuring, whenever it features less than 3 articles or products, let's canonicalize to the upper category to avoid showing something that has thin content or the won't satisfy the user experience and will identify or might identify to be too weak, let's say, or not high quality enough to be able to stand by itself and to be worthy to index, right? So this type of criteria, I believe, is fundamental. Another question regarding themes, which is the other big area. I have seen in my own case, if you start using a certain particular theme because of a very cool functionality, let's say with maps or navigation and etc., but all of a sudden you realize that it's so slow, the speed and the user experience goes down, very down. I should have chosen this other one. And I'm afraid that there's so much noise lately and so many of them, and many of them are also free, but you can see that the best are definitely paid. So how do you recommend to go with that? Which are those themes that are whether free, freemium, or very low price that you will recommend to start with?
Sure. So yeah, it's a super tricky marketplace. And again, WordPress's like failure to manage how WordPress is marketed is a big part of this. There are a few routes you can go. Anything in the WordPress themes repository is probably going to be not terrible. Part of the vetting process for those themes being available is the WordPress core team have looked at the code and made sure that it doesn't do anything crazy. Doesn't mean it's going to be great or look great, but at least it's not going to blow up your server. However, everything in there is essentially free, and therefore you're ruling out all of the developers who want to make any money, who are quite often the better developers. So there is this whole secondary marketplace if you can go out and buy expensive themes, but then you're in the Wild West. So if you're going to go out and pay for a theme from a third-party marketplace, make sure the marketplace itself is reputable, and whichever company or person is selling the theme has a great reputation, and that there's evidence that there are ways to get in touch with support and things. Otherwise, you're going to buy something, you're going to encounter a problem, and it's going to be unfixable. Now, that said, there is a third route, which is increasingly the whole kind of back end of WordPress is gradually changing and becoming more flexible and block based. The world of theme builders rather than themes might be the better route to go. So plugins like Elementor, Divi, Beaver Builder, a handful of others allow you to design and create your own themes with kind of drag and drop templating, etc. Those are really powerful, but they come with a bit of performance overhead. However, with the changes that are happening in WordPress, they are getting faster and they are getting better, and that performance overhead is decreasing. So if I was going to gamble on it, I would probably want to get something like an Elementor or a Divi and spend a bit more time building my own thing using that kind of tooling. If you want to go really out there, GeneratePress is really nice. It's a bit more hands-on, but that's the best one at the moment for that kind of trade-off between I want something that is reasonably intuitive to drag and drop and build with, but without any of those compromises on performance or usability, etc. And there's going to be more happening in that space. But yeah, I would be super careful going and spending money on the open market for themes. You just don't know what you're buying. And in fact, another thought you mentioned just just now, the kind of how easy it is in theory to go and say, I want to get a developer to customize this tag logic based on a number of things, etc. This is the great strength of WordPress and what makes it, I think, in many ways, a stronger option than, say, a Wix or a Squarespace or a Shopify. That all of this is open source and you own the code and you own the content, and it's super easy to customize. And behind the scenes, there are every single aspect of how WordPress works. A developer can go intercept this piece of logic and change it. You can say, if it is a Tuesday and a visitor is on the homepage, make the canonical URL something else, for example, or change how this page renders. Every single facet of it can be altered. So if you find you get close with a theme that provides most of what you need, it is super trivial for a decent developer to go, you know what, add a thing here, change how this thing works, hide this thing if it's a full moon, super easy.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because I mean, if you have a little bit of resources, it will be easier for you. For example, something that I just recall, right? Like internal linking, just one of also those issues, not only exclusively for WordPress as a platform, but in general that SEOs have whenever optimizing websites. Good cross-linking between products or categories that actually make sense semantically are helpful for the user journey to help users to convert. It's always a challenge. We know that there are plugins nowadays and even themes that have some sort of models that automatically offer you this option, right? And I'm like, okay, so if I am not able to configure anything, how I make sure that I can control right pages, meant to rank pages, the pages that I really want to push, the products that I really want to push, or the articles that are more meaningful for me are the ones that I am actively endorsing through this area or through this topic, right? So it's great that there are automated solutions there, but be careful about the level of configuration, personalization based on what you actually want. And then what Jono also mentioned before, like the trade-off, right? Like, if it is something that if you see that there's a single benefit or a single functionality, and this plugin is, again, making your website to be like difficult to browse or generates a lot of like extra loading times, etc., assess if it wouldn't be better to spend the same resources or similar resources, or do a little bit of extra investment to get a developer to do that directly, natively on your platform, right? Because that is the benefit, that there are so many WordPress knowledgeable devs out there that might be able to do the work without you having to pay annually for a plugin or a theme or whatever, and offering you a lot of stuff that you actually don't want or need just for that, right? So that is something to definitely think of. And then I believe that another question that I have here that has to do a lot with this, right? It was like, if the client chose a theme that is not SEO friendly because it was code heavy at some point, or the way it was coded, is it worth it to focus resources or technical improvements on optimizing the team rather than content strategies? Or is it better just to switch the team? Like, what would you say are the top criteria to use in this case to decide to like let's move with a new team here rather than trying to fix something that it's very difficult to fix?
Sure, that's really tricky. I talk to a lot of people who are in this position, and it comes down to how badly built is the thing. Because if it's really badly built, you're going to expend a ton of resources trying to get it to in a position where it does what you need to do. If it's only slightly badly built, because of the way that WordPress works, you might be able to fix it on top of that. So again, WordPress's core thing is everything is filterable. You can intercept different bits of logic at different times and say, okay, you had some code that said make this orange. Actually, I want you to make it red. If the theme code isn't too bad, you can get an external developer or a plugin to intercept their bad logic and replace it with good logic, and then you can unpick it and make it performant. You'll need to talk to somebody who can interrogate and look at the theme code to know whether that's possible. But in so many of these cases, the problem is it's just been built too badly, or it's been built 20 years ago and no one's updated the code. Sometimes that might be fine if you're not trying to compete super aggressively in SEO. Then I don't know what you're doing, but yeah, maybe the trade-offs aren't too bad. I would check your Core Web Vital scores as a good indicator. Like if this thing takes 8 seconds to load, going to be tricky. If it takes 8 seconds to load, then you've installed a whole bunch of caching plugins and Cloudflare, it still takes 8 seconds, you know you've got a serious problem. If it's not very mobile friendly, that sort of stuff might be very easy to fix by a freelance front-end developer who can do a bit of CSS. It might be an absolute nightmare depending on how the theme's been coded. I would pay somebody. In fact, I shared a link in the chat to a site called Codable.io. Other sites exist, but this is quite a nice curated marketplace of freelance WordPress developers. And one of the things they do, their projects need a brief, so you need to describe the problem you're trying to solve. But if you struggle with that bit and you need somebody just to look at it and help you to work out what the problem and the brief is, I think it's like $100. That sort of thing would be really good for like a fact-finding mission for, I think I have a problem with performance with this theme. Can you help me understand how bad it is and what my options are? $100 and you'll get a triage, and then you've got a plan and you know how bad it is.
That is a really, really good recommendation, because I actually used to work with a web developer for WordPress that, I mean, the whole work was done through Codable, even if I found him like through social, etc. And we were put in touch, but he liked to work through the platform. And this is where he managed, used to manage all of the
nice.
lines. So that is really, really nice. So let's go into SEO plugins. And I know that you have tons of experience with, of course, Yoast, and competitors of Yoast, because you used to work with Yoast. I know that you have also a bias there because you used to work with Yoast too, but let's try to be objective. Which plugin or SEO plugin would you recommend to use for different scenarios?
There are several schools of thought in the world of SEO, and it's not quite as cut and dry as white hat versus black hat. But the difference between Yoast and Rank Math is Yoast makes decisions on your behalf about best practice. And if you want to change that, go code it. But there are no toggles and no buttons and no checkboxes. It will just do what's right for you. Rank Math will give you 100 checkboxes and toggles. Press's core functionality. It doesn't do a lot of SEO at all. So you need quite a big plugin to backfill all that functionality. You need to handle indexing and crawling, XML sitemaps, performance schema, all of these kinds of things, which the Yoast and the Rank Maths, etc. do.
Let's follow up with the next question regarding WordPress being used as an online store or e-commerce platform. Can a WooCommerce website perform as well, or be used or provide the functionalities that Shopify is able to provide nowadays? And I love this question too, because I know that also Yoast has a plugin for Shopify. I'm sure you also took a look at it.
So I guess the short answer is yes, it can. WordPress can definitely deliver, on like sophisticated e-commerce, but there are trade-offs. So Shopify is really good if you have a conventional, simple store doing conventional things. You have a product, you sell t-shirts in 3 sizes and 4 colors, and you ship to the US and mainland Europe without any complexity. And your primary focus is rapid growth, AdWords supported, discovery, flashy category pages, and big visual design. Absolutely brilliant for that entire kind of entrepreneur marketplace. Wonderful. Also phenomenally good with things like they integrate and take control of the whole shipping and delivery systems. They're increasingly tying directly into Amazon. They've got backdoors into some of Google's indexing and crawling systems. Really, really nice. Their internationalization stuff works almost magically out the box. And even though it has a bit of a bad reputation, actually the technical SEO on Shopify is not terrible. It is far from perfect, but it is good enough for that kind of audience generally. At some point, if you have an ever so slightly more complicated business or website, it's going to start getting uncomfortable because you can't operate outside of those constraints. It is very, very hard to extend and modify Shopify. The plugin add-on ecosystem in there is quite limited in what it can do because of how that works structurally. You can bolt things onto pages, but it's very, very hard to kind of make architectural and functional changes in Shopify. So enter WooCommerce. WooCommerce out the box, pretty rubbish. However, there are tens of thousands of add-ons for all the things. So out of the box, it will not, for example, support special offers or bundled products or loyalty or having dedicated pages for returns policies or multilingual functionality, etc. All of these things are things that can be solved by plugins if you know that they are problems that you want to solve. Like if you've never come across the concept of a special offer before, for example, not a great one, you need to know that you need a special offer to then go and look for a special offer plugin, of which there are 500. Which one do I want? Which one do I need? That one also does returns. Do I want that one? This one's a 3-star. For like, you've got to go and do a huge amount of research, and each one of those will cost you, I don't know, $80 a year. And at some point, the trade-off between the Shopify cost versus WooCommerce, yeah, WooCommerce is very cheap to free. But then if I've got 20 add-ons so that I can do returns policies and international tax law and whatever else, the trade-offs get quite interesting. But with WooCommerce, ultimately, you have far more control. And again, everything in WordPress is filterable. You can say, if this product, I want a developer to write 10 lines of code that say, if this product is out of stock, show a modal overlay, change the indexing status, redirect them if they're in Germany, fire some analytics tags, I don't know what else, but that sort of stuff, trivial development work. In Shopify, nightmarish project. So yeah, it can get there, but you need to know what you need to know. You need to do all the research and find all the plugins. Some of those plugins won't work together very well. Some of them will conflict and overlap. It is a huge amount of work to customize it to make what you need. But when it's done, it will be the perfect fit for your business. And you can make it fast, you can make it performant. So yeah, ease of use versus control and sophistication. Tricky.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you very much. So start wrapping up. There's a question here that I would like to address because very straightforward. Any tips on what to do if you get a warning saying that your website runs an older version of PHP, upgraded? Very straightforward.
Yeah.
Actually, I was so this happened to me many times in the past with many websites that I had in this very old hosting service that I used to use, and I was like, oh my god, I don't want to do it because I know that they can break at any point, and I don't want to be troubleshooting that, reversing, and I also don't have time right now to get in touch with the developer that I used to work with just to do the proper thing before testing, validating, whatever. And I was like, at some point, okay, now I have a little bit of room and time, I will do it. But yes, it ended up working well. Many hostings will also allow you to do a validation, like a checkup first to see if all what you have installed there will work well with the new version of PHP that you need. But I will say do it because shockingly, this is one of the ways that I have found that I have made many of these websites much faster without even looking to make them faster, because the versions of PHP are, oh my God, this is another level of performance for sure.
Yeah, I definitely get it upgraded. Like every day that you sit on an old version, your website is getting slower compared to your competitors, and you're definitely at risk of things breaking, getting hacked, etc. There is, if you go into your WordPress sidebar, there's a section called Tools, and in there there's a section called Site Health. that will scan your server setup and your configuration. And if you have any really bad issues, like you're running PHP 5.5, which has been deprecated for about a decade, it will warn you. And in most cases, it will say, okay, here's what you should do. Here's the email you should send to your hosting company, etc. But really, a lot of that, if you're in a position where that's being flagged as a problem, there's a deeper problem, which is that your hosting probably sucks. Yes, you can host a WordPress website for $1 a month. You shouldn't, because you're compromising not only on speed, but on security and expertise, etc. I would definitely take whatever you're spending on your hosting per month and add another $40 to it. That feels like maybe if you're only spending $20, up to $60 is quite a big jump potentially. But that's the difference between a system running in a basement that nobody's ever touched, that is dusty and on fire, and an actual human who knows about WordPress, having configured the environment. And then things like PHP versions, they should be managing and taking control of. They should be performance tuning and tweaking. Then the only bit you need to worry about is, oh, I've got some code in my theme that was written in 2012 that's going to break. And actually, this is going back to trade-offs and having lots of plugins again. This is the advantage of using a plugin rather than getting a developer to hand code it. That if there's a developer who owns and maintains that plugin, and PHP is moving along and updating over time, they're probably updating that as well, so you don't have to go back to your developer and say, hey, could you rewrite this thing? Because you're essentially paying for a service. All of these things are about trade-offs, whether it's within WordPress or it's WordPress versus others. It comes down to, where do you want to put the burden? Do you want to spend more money for something that's easier to use, that doesn't give me control? Do you want to spend less money for something that seems like, all of this is money, time, expertise over the short and long term? And there's no right answer, but yeah, it comes down to you and your business.
100%. But it's good that we know the criteria and the trade-off 100%. And there's not like a bulletproof type of way to go for all of them, for sure. So thank you very much, Jono, for all of the insights, all of your expertise. It has been quite useful. I hope that all of the participants and also people watching have clarified most of their WordPress SEO questions and doubts. And if you like today's session, make sure to subscribe to the channel and continue watching most of the Q&As that we will be doing for all of the different platforms, because still there are pros and cons, but there are more options out there that it will be very useful for you to take into account too. So thank you very much, Jono, and everybody.